In the heart of Kibera, Kenya's largest slum, Nia stood in a one-room shack packing her clothes in silence. Her hands were shaking, her eyes swollen from crying the night before. It wasn't a fight that ended things. It was something worse. It was silence. Her mother-in-law stood at the doorway, arms crossed, eyes cold. "You are unworthy," she spat, like Nia was something dirty. "Go back where you came from." Nia looked at her husband, Kazi, hoping for a sign, a word, a touch, anything, but he just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, saying nothing. That silence crushed her more than the insult. It was the moment she realized she was truly alone. There was no goodbye, no reason given, just the quiet betrayal of a man she had loved and built her life around. As she stepped out with her small bag, neighbors watched through thin curtains, whispering. Some pitied her, others judged. Nia kept her head low, heart pounding, every step heavier than the last. It felt like she wasn't leaving a home. She was being thrown out like trash, not because she had done something wrong, but because she no longer fit the image of a perfect wife in there. That walk back to her parents' house was the longest journey of her life, not in distance, but in pain. Nia had always dreamed of being a mother. When she found out she was pregnant for the first time, she smiled for days. She started knitting tiny clothes, imagining a little one running around. But that dream ended too soon. Her first miscarriage felt like her heart had been ripped out. The second one broke her even more. But what hurt the most wasn't just the loss. It was how everyone treated her after. Her in-laws changed overnight. They stopped speaking kindly. Her mother-in-law began making loud comments in the kitchen, saying things like, "A woman who can't give us a son is useless." At first, Nia thought they were just grieving in their own way. But then came the whispers, the looks, and the blame, like she chose for her body to fail. Kazi, her husband, didn't say much. He didn't comfort her, didn't defend her, didn't hold her when she cried herself to sleep. When his mother said, "She can't give us a child. She doesn't belong in this family," Kazi just stood there. Not a word, not a fight, just silence. That silence told Nia everything. She realized she was alone in her pain, alone in a house that once felt like a home. No one saw her heartbreak. No one cared about her healing. Her womb had become their weapon, and they used it to tear her down. She stopped smiling, stopped dreaming, started shrinking. Every room she walked into felt colder. Every day she stayed felt like she was fading. She kept asking herself, what did I do wrong? But deep down she knew it wasn't her, it was them, their ignorance, their cruelty, their need for a son over a soul. And so slowly, the love that once held her together began to fall apart, not because of what she couldn't give, but because of what they refused to give her: love, support, and the chance to heal. Nia walked back into her childhood home with nothing but a small bag and a broken heart. Her parents' clay house was small, with cracked walls and a leaky roof, but it was the only place she had left. Her mother didn't ask many questions. She just hugged her tightly, the kind of hug that says, "You don't have to explain, you're safe now." But even that warmth couldn't stop the heaviness Nia carried inside. The village didn't stay quiet for long. People noticed she had come back alone. The whispers started like soft rain and turned into a storm. She couldn't keep her husband. She must be cursed. No children, no worth. Nia could feel their words even when they weren't spoken. Every glance, every muttered comment at the water well, every sudden silence when she walked by, it all cut deep. Some days, she didn't want to leave the house. She stayed in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering how her life had fallen apart so fast. The woman she used to be, full of hope, love and plans, felt like a stranger now. She felt ashamed, like she had failed not just her marriage, but her entire community. But something was happening inside her, quietly, slowly, like a fire starting in the dark. It wasn't anger, it was something deeper. A storm of pain, yes, but also of questions. Why was her worth tied to her womb? Why did no one speak up for her? Why did women like her have to suffer in silence? The more the world tried to make her feel small, the more something inside her refused to disappear. She didn't know it yet, but that storm was the beginning of her rising. For now, though, she just sat with her pain, letting it burn, letting it shape her. She was at rock bottom, but the ground beneath her was starting to feel like something solid, like a place she could stand again. That night, Nia sat on the edge of her parents' narrow bed, tears still wet on her cheeks, her heart feeling like it had been hollowed out. The soft glow of a single lamp cast long shadows across the room. She reached into her old wooden trunk, one of the only things she'd brought back from her marriage, and pulled out a stack of yellowed letters tied with a faded ribbon. They were all from her grandmother, Mama Zuri, who had passed away 2 years earlier. Nia hadn't had the strength to read them until now. With trembling fingers, she untied the ribbon and slid out the top letter. Mama Zuri's handwriting curved across the page, like gentle vines wrapping around each word. Nia's tears fell onto the paper as she began to read. "My dear child," it opened, "I see your spirit, fierce and bright, even when the world tries to dim you." She ignored those words at first, too raw to absorb them, but one line made her stop and hold her breath. "Never beg to stay where you're not valued." Her heart jolted. Never beg to stay where you're not valued. Those words spun around her mind, echoing louder than all the cruel whispers she'd heard. She rubbed the smudge of ink on her palm, feeling Mama Zuri's love flow through that simple sentence. It was like Mama Zuri was in the room with her, holding her hand, telling her she deserved better. Nia pressed the letter to her chest, letting the warmth of her grandmother's words fill the empty spaces in the pain of rejection, the shame of miscarriage, the silence of the man she loved. All of it suddenly felt different. It still hurt. But now she had permission to stand up, to walk away, to choose herself, instead of begging for scraps of affection. She spent the rest of the night reading every letter, each one a reminder of her grandmother's fierce faith in her. Mama Zuri wrote about strength, about finding light in darkness, about dancing even when your feet are tired. By dawn, Nia's tears had dried, replaced by a quiet fire burning in her chest. She folded the letters carefully and placed them in her bag. The next morning, as she stepped outside into the dusty courtyard, she didn't feel like the broken woman who had returned home. She felt like someone reborn, armed with Mama Zuri's words and ready to claim the life she was always meant to live. And with every step, that line, "Never beg to stay where you're not valued," beat steadily in her heart, fueling her toward whatever came next. Nia didn't have money. She didn't have a job, but she had one thing, a fire inside her that wouldn't go out. After reading her grandmother's letters, something shifted. She couldn't sit around feeling sorry for herself anymore. She needed to move, to try, to start somewhere, anywhere. That somewhere came in the form of a goat. Her cousin Amina had a small piece of land just outside the village, and one afternoon she showed up with a smile and said, "I don't have much, but I can give you this goat. Start there." Nia laughed through tears. It felt small, even silly at first, but something about that goat felt like hope, so she said yes. She named the goat Tumaini, which means hope in Swahili. At first, it was just one goat, one bucket of milk a day. Nia learned how to care for her, how to feed her right, how to clean, how to wake up early and stay up late. She walked from house to house in the village, selling fresh milk to anyone who would buy. Some slammed the door in her face. Some laughed. "You, selling milk?" they scoffed. But some smiled, tasted her milk, and came back for more. She saved every coin. She didn't buy new clothes. She didn't waste a cent. After a few months, she bought a second goat, then a third. She built a small shelter for them with her own hands. She studied dairy farming online at the local internet cafe, scribbling notes on the back of used notebooks. She was determined to learn, to grow, to build something that was hers. The same people who once whispered behind her back were now asking, how did she do it? And every time someone remembered her as the woman who was sent away like trash, she worked harder. Every insult became fuel. Every rejection became motivation. They had tried to bury her, but they didn't know she was a seed. Within a year, Nia had 5 goats and regular customers. She called her little business Tumaini Milk. It wasn't just a dairy business. It was proof that she was more than what they said she was. She didn't need anyone's approval anymore. She had built something from nothing, and it was only the beginning. Nia never planned to be on the radio. She was just running her small dairy business, waking up early to milk her goats, delivering bottles by hand, and saving every coin. One day, a friend from Nairobi visited the village and bought some milk. After hearing Nia's story, everything she had been through, she said, "You need to share this. People need to hear you." At first, Nia laughed. "Who would want to listen to me?" she asked. "I'm just a woman with goats." But the friend believed in her and made a few calls. A local radio show in Nairobi was running a series on women overcoming hardship. They invited Nia to speak. Nervous but curious, she agreed. When she walked into the radio station, she was shaking. The studio was cold, full of wires and buttons she didn't understand. But the moment the host asked her, "Tell us where it all began," Nia's voice found its strength. She didn't hold back. She spoke about the miscarriages, the shame, being thrown out like trash. She talked about sitting on the floor crying and finding her grandmother's letter. She spoke about the goat, the struggle, the laughter behind her back, and how she turned all of it into fuel. Her voice cracked. She cried a little. She laughed at herself too, but she didn't hide anything. The phone lines lit up. Women called in crying. Men called in apologizing for what women like Nia go through. One woman said, "You just gave me the courage to leave my abusive husband." Another said, "You reminded me that I'm not alone." That night, Nia didn't sleep. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. People from different towns messaged her, asking about her milk, asking about her journey, asking how they could help. In one night, she went from that woman with the goats to someone people respected, someone people looked up to. The same villagers who once laughed at her now stopped her in the market just to say, "We heard you, we're proud of you." Some even asked if their daughters could come learn from her. Nia didn't change who she was. She just shared the truth, and that truth set her free and lit a fire in everyone who heard it. 3 years had passed since the day Nia was sent away like she was nothing. In those years, she had built something strong. Her dairy business was growing. She was invited to speak on radio shows, and people from all over Kenya knew her name. She was no longer the woman they pitied. She was a woman they respected. One afternoon, as she was feeding her goats, she saw a car pull up near her home. It was dusty from the village roads, but she recognized the faces immediately. Her heart didn't race. She didn't panic. She just wiped her hands on her dress and waited. Out stepped her former mother-in-law, her ex-husband Kazi, and 2 of his uncles. They looked older, more tired, and they didn't walk with the same pride they once had. Kazi couldn't even meet her eyes. His mother, the same woman who once called Nia unworthy, now looked down at the ground, her voice softer than Nia had ever heard. "We made a mistake," she said. "Kazi, he lost his job. His new wife left him. We didn't know how good we had it until you were gone. We're asking if you'd consider coming back." For a moment, Nia said nothing. She looked at the same people who once made her feel small, who threw her out without a second thought. Now here they were, coming to her for help, for comfort, for healing. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply smiled. It wasn't a cruel smile. It was peaceful. It said everything she didn't need to say out loud, that she had healed, that she had grown, that she no longer needed their approval or their apologies. "Thank you for coming," she said kindly, "but I've already found my home." And with that, she turned back to her goats, the sun warm on her back, her heart light. She didn't need revenge. Her life was her answer. Her success was her closure. As they drove away, slower than they came, Nia stood tall, still that same woman, but no longer broken. She was whole, and she had never begged to be loved again. When Nia was invited to speak on national TV, she almost said no. She wasn't used to big lights and cameras. Her story had been on the radio, yes, but this was different. This was Kenya's biggest talk show, watched by millions. But something inside her whispered, "It's time." She wore a simple dress and held her grandmother's letter in her hand as she stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, the cameras were everywhere, but Nia stayed calm. She looked into the crowd and saw faces waiting to hear her. And for the first time, she wasn't nervous. She was ready. The host asked her, "What would you say to the people who once called you Barren?" Nia took a breath, looked straight into the camera, and said, "My womb wasn't empty. Your love was." The studio went silent. She continued, voice steady, but full of feeling. "I didn't lose babies because I was weak. I lost them because life is hard sometimes. But I was blamed, thrown out, laughed at, and yet, here I am, still standing, still loving, still giving." As she spoke, tears filled the eyes of women in the audience. Some nodded, some wept, because her words weren't just about her. They were about all the women who had been shamed, blamed, and silenced for something they couldn't control. That moment didn't just touch hearts. It shook the whole continent. The clip of her saying those 10 words, "My womb wasn't empty, your love was," went viral across Africa. People shared it, quoted it, cried over it. Thousands of women messaged her, saying, "You spoke for me." Nia didn't cry on stage, not because she wasn't feeling, but because she had cried enough already. Now was her time to be heard, to be seen, to give voice to pain that had been hidden too long. By the time she walked off that stage, she wasn't just Nia the farmer or Nia the divorced woman. She had become something bigger, a symbol, a voice, a light, and this time the world was finally listening. Nia had once been called Barren, like it was a curse, like it made her less of a woman, but she knew better now. She had already built a life from nothing. She had turned pain into purpose, and she was ready to love in a way the world didn't expect. It started with one little girl. Her name was Achieng. She was 9, quiet, and alone. Nia met her near the local market, barefoot and hungry. Her parents had died, and she had no one. Nia didn't think twice. She brought Achieng home, fed her, bathed her, and tucked her into bed that night, like she had always belonged. Then came another, and another. Within a year, Nia had adopted 12 girls, orphans, abandoned, forgotten, but not anymore. Her little clay home became full of laughter, noise, and love. The goats bleated in the background, meals were shared on the floor, and bedtime stories were read by candlelight. It wasn't perfect, but it was safe. It was home. People started calling her Mama Nia. Some asked, "Why take in so many? Aren't they too much?" Nia would just smile and say, "I don't need to create life to give it," and she meant it. These girls weren't her by blood, but they were hers in every other way. She helped them with schoolwork, braided their hair, listened to their dreams. She gave them the love she had once begged for. One day, Achieng looked up at her and said, "I want to be like you when I grow up." Nia hugged her tight and whispered, "You'll be even greater." Word spread. Women who couldn't have children came to her for comfort. Girls who had no mothers came to her for warmth. Her home became more than just a house. It became a haven, a place of healing, of second chances. Nia never had a baby in her womb, but she became a mother in the deepest, truest sense. She gave love without limits. She created a family from broken pieces, and the same world that once called her empty now saw her as full of love, of purpose, of life. She wasn't just a mother to 12 girls. She had become a mother to a whole generation, a mother of a nation. Nia never imagined her name would mean something to the whole country. She had only wanted peace, a way to survive, and a place to call home. But her story had touched so many hearts that it grew into something bigger, something powerful. One day, a young woman knocked on her door. She had been thrown out by her in-laws too. She had nowhere to go. Nia welcomed her in, just like she had done with the girls. Then another woman came, and another. Some had been left because they couldn't have children. Some had survived abuse. Some just needed someone to say, "You matter." Nia couldn't turn them away, so she started something new, the Nia Foundation, a safe space, a support system, a second chance. It began in her backyard, with just a few plastic chairs and open arms. But soon, it grew into a real center, a place where women could learn skills, earn their own money, and rebuild their lives with dignity. People donated, volunteers came, even women who had once been helped returned to help others. It became a circle of strength, built on pain, but held together by love. Nia often stood in the center, watching women laugh, cook, and create together. She would think back to the day she was called unworthy, and now, her name stood for strength. Her story gave others the courage to rise. From shame to spotlight, her journey became more than personal. It became a movement that reminded thousands of women across Kenya, "You are not broken, you are becoming."